Hi everyone, it's Lisa, and I'm asking you to come join me today as I create a pocket bunny card. So today's stamp comes from the Spellbinders Clear Stamp of the Month kit for February 2023. And now I am pulling out my Spellbinders paper pad from December 22. This is part of the card making club kit. And the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and trim my selected paper to 4¼ by 5½, which is your typical A2 size card. And as you saw there, I had to go back and trim a second time as I did make a little mistake in alignment with the paper. So don't be afraid if you have to go back and fix things. I'm now going to go ahead and take my Tombow tape runner, and I'm going to place some tape on the back of this so I can attach it to my card. So this is my second video, so I thought it would be nice that I chatted with you all and you got to know me a little bit as I am putting this card together. So whilst I'm sticking my mat onto my cardstock, first of all, I live in Orlando, Florida. Contrary to what my accent will tell you, it is an English accent you're hearing. I live in the Central Florida area, and I've been living here since 2009. I did college program at the Walt Disney World Resort in 2007 and met my husband there. So that's how I ended up here in Florida. And I brought my card making hobby with me. I've actually been doing crafts as long as I can remember. I remember as a child, my grandmother used to do scrapbooking with me. And right now I'm going ahead and using the elliptical ovals by Spellbinders to create some additional mats to add dimension to the card. I really like this particular die because it is shaped like an Easter egg, and this particular card I'm making, it will be suitable as an Easter card. So I felt this was the perfect die to use. So I've gone ahead and done the white backer with the largest size, and I'm now going to take the second largest size and place it on pink cardstock to create a secondary layer to just add a bit more dimension. And whilst this is going through the machine, just like I said right before I switched back to card making, my first memories of doing crafting was scrapbooking with my grandmother. I had a brown craft paper book with a red cover, and she used to bring magazines and pictures that she'd taken of us, and we'd go ahead and scrapbook. So a lot of my early scrapbooks were holiday brochures and magazine pictures, and I would use those to create what I now use my die cuts for. So going back to the card making, I am now going to go ahead and start stamping. The other thing you saw me put through my die machine a moment ago was the backings for my stamping today, which is this beautiful pocket bunny. And this is from the Spellbinders Clear Stamp of the Month for February 2023. If these are not on the Spellbinders site at the moment, keep checking over the next few days as the clubs have just closed for the February month. So any leftovers will become a la carte purchases in the next few days. So I'm going to go ahead and add these to my MISTI stamping tool. I am using my cardstock negatives as a template so I can put these in place easily. And then adding my die cuts back in. Sometimes I will do it this way around. Sometimes I will stamp first and then die cut later. It just felt easier for this card to do this way around as I was already doing some additional die cuts for the ovals. So I'm now going ahead and inking up those stamps with my favourite ink. And of course, like my last video, that is a Memento Black Tuxedo ink. And I forgot to get my stamp pressure tool out, so there you see me fumbling to get it out of my little container that I have on my desk there for it. And adding some pressure just to make sure that does apply evenly. And then I'm opening up again. And I'm going to go ahead and put a second layer of ink on my stamps. just to make those images a bit more crisp. This time they stamped really well, but they just needed it to be a bit more crisp, and I wanted more dimension in the ink. So there we go. Adding a bit more pressure. And I noticed I made a mistake here. It had not fully aligned correctly. So I'm going to go back and restamp these and use those as the backers for more stability. So after learning from my mistake, I went ahead and used my Tombow marker. Sorry, Tombow tape runner. I don't know why I'm saying marker today. And I added a little bit of that to my MISTI just to keep those in place to make sure they didn't shift and cause that double stamping issue again. And then I went ahead and restamped these. So again, even if you make a mistake like I did, you can still use those pieces. You'll see me use them later on as I glue them to the back just to add some more stability to the images. Go ahead with those stamp tools again. I'm going back in with the second set of ink, and whilst I'm doing this, so like I said, my earliest crafting memories was with my grandmother doing scrapbooking, and from that I started to really get interested in actual card making. And soon around that time, the local garden centre opened up with a craft section, and I purchased my first woodblock stamp. And I remember using that to create my first ever birthday card. That was for my mother. And I still have that stamp today. It's in my stash. Maybe one day I'll be able to pull that out and show it to you. So now I'm taking this out of my MISTI and setting my MISTI to the side. And whilst we're waiting for me to finish this on the screen, like I said, my mother's birthday card was the first stamped image, and on and off I made greetings cards for my family members since then. I do occasionally buy one, especially with working full time. Sometimes you just don't have the time to make them. And also, I did have a few bouts where depression was really affecting my ability to craft, and that is usually if I don't want to craft, that's a big mental health warning to me, and I know I need to take care of it now. So now I'm going in with my alcohol markers. These are from CaliArt. I purchased them on Amazon. I unfortunately don't have the money to be able to buy Copic markers right now. They will be my go-to if I have a choice. But I'm going to go ahead with a lighter colour of grey and colour in my bunny. This is going to be a grey bunny rabbit on this particular card. And for this first layer, I'm making sure that I fully saturate the paper. And this is going to be super important a little bit further down the line, as it will help me blend the darker colours I'm going to use on the bunny to make it look nice and smooth and seamless. So as you can see, I'm really being careful, making sure that I really saturate the bunny there. I'm now going to grab my second colour, and this is more of a medium grey, just a little bit darker than the original colour. And I'm going to use that first of all to shade in the ear, to give the ear some more dimension, and then really focus on the areas where it's obvious that the dimension of the bunny changes. So on the edges and where the fur is located and ends on the bunny. And then once I've done this, I'm actually going to grab the other marker again, and I'm going to start in the darker area that I've just blended and push out just to help blend that and make it more seamless. And you'll see me do that in a moment as I'm talking about myself. So like I said, I made a lot of cards over the time, and I also continue scrapbooking. I did buy my first like proper scrapbook, like the ones that we think about nowadays, in probably around about 2005, and started scrapbooking some of my holidays, as we say in English, or vacations, as you say in America, specifically to the Walt Disney World Resort and Disneyland Paris. But also, my adventures have taken me to places like Turkey and France in other areas. And so I started documenting those activities. I then in 2007, also using scrapbooking, documented my college program, and I look at even that scrapbook now and just think about how far I've come with my art. I don't really do as much scrapbooking anymore. I tend to stick with the card making. I probably should do some more scrapbooking. So maybe now that I'm doing these videos, I can maybe start doing some more scrapbooking again. If that's something that you want to see on the channel, please comment below and let me know that so I know to put that content into my channel. So I'm now going in with even darker colour grey, and I'm just highlighting the ear and where the fur dimensions change. I'm just putting a little spot on, and this is just to really add that additional piece of dimension. And again, I'm going to go in with the other two colours I used earlier just to make sure that blends in and looks smooth and seamless across the bunny. And alcohol markers are one of my favourite mediums to colour in my stamps with. I've actually only started using them recently, about a year ago. I'm by no means an expert at using the alcohol markers. I've just kind of watched YouTube videos here and there and seen what others are doing and taken what works for me and ignored the stuff that I've not particularly found work for me. So I'm finishing up now with the lighter colour. So this is the last blending on the bunny. Just taking that lighter colour and making sure it's really nicely blended and there's no sharp lines in the fur of the bunny. And I'm going to move on and do the flowers next. As my backing is going to be that pink cross stitch pattern, I decided I'm going to create pink flowers with yellow centers, and then the bunny's going to be in a denim colored pocket. So you'll see me bring those markers out, and again for the pocket and the flowers I use the same principle, starting with the lighter color and then using the darker colors and blending each time I introduce a new color. So a little bit more about my crafting journey. So as I said, I met my husband whilst I was on college program, and we got married in January of 2009 at the Disney's Wedding Pavilion. And it was really the first time I'd made any sort of card project in bulk, because I decided to make all my save the dates, all my wedding invitations, and then we also made all of my wedding program brochures using a stamp. And at the time I was still using wooden stamps, and clear stamps had just really started to really come into my horizon a bit more, but I was still pretty much using a wooden stamp. And I used that wooden stamp with a pink ink, and then we heat emboss some pink embossing powder and added a lot of silver sparkle to match my wedding colours. And that was the first time that I realised that I'm actually getting good at this. And it had taken a long time for me to get to that point. And then I discovered Cricut. And for the longest time, I actually only used the Cricut. I really didn't use my stamps. I kind of forgot about them. And then with working full time, just not having a lot of time, Cricut became like the only medium I used. And I mostly used it still for paper products and the occasional vinyl products. And then 2020 hit. And as we all know, 2020 was probably one of the strangest years of our life. Just like September 11th, I remember exactly where I was when I was told my work was closing down due to COVID. At the time, I was working parade audience control at Disney's Magic Kingdom. That basically meant I was working the parades and fireworks. And we came into work and we're told, yeah, we're not going to shut down. They're just keeping an eye on it at Team Disney, i.e. the execs were keeping an eye on it. And so we went out for the 3 o'clock Festival of Fantasy parade, and lo and behold, right before the parade started, we started getting told by the guests, hey, you're going to be closing on Sunday. Um, which came as a bit of a shock to us after what we'd just been told. So we actually got told by the guests because we were out doing our job at the time. And so that gave me a lot of time. We were closed until July. We, as cast members, went back in June, um, mid-June. So in that whole time between March and June, I got to really do a lot of crafting. And it's also when I started really playing with my stamps again and really honing in and deciding, actually, yes, paper crafts is my favorite crafting hobby. In that time, I did try out a lot of other crafts. I did some wood crafts, I did some vinyl crafts, heat transfer vinyl. That was my first experience with it. Learned to do some glass etching. So a lot of new crafts for me, and also was able to enjoy my original crafts. And this continued on past that point. Of course, I couldn't do as much once we reopened, especially with reopening. We actually were working a lot when we reopened from COVID. As you can imagine, if you were sick, you had to call in, even if it was a small size snuffle. So a lot of time we had cast who were calling out purely because work said we had to, and so it was left to the rest of us to pick up the slack and really make sure that those rides and attractions were still operating. And at that particular time, I got to work in Fantasyland. It was a land I'd never intended to work on at the Walt Disney Company. And so I got to experience an attraction in an area that I probably would never have done. And also, my time working in those areas has influenced what I put in my card making. For example, I was working on the carousel and I saw a stamp from Hero Arts with the carousel horses on it and ended up buying it. And I don't think I would have bought that if I hadn't had that experience and got to really appreciate carousels. And so I love how my work life also really goes into my crafting life. And so here you see me finishing up that pocket on the bunny. Just adding the final colour, which I just used around the outside on this. And then I'm going to go ahead and use those lighter colours again just to blend that in a little bit, just so it doesn't look as harsh. But I wanted to really make sure it was very thin line and really stood out on the pocket, because in real life our pockets look like that as well. And so working for Disney, really still crafting. And then I went back into the classroom as a teacher, and all of a sudden I was finding I really didn't have the time to do my crafting, and it was really affecting my mental health. And so eventually I got really sick. And so when I stepped away from teaching, I was really able to focus on my crafting again. And that has led to me actually starting my YouTube channel, allowing me to craft, and also it makes me set time aside to craft, which I think is really important. When you find something that you enjoy so much, for your mental health, you need to make time for it. When you don't make time for it, that is when the problems really start. And then mental health can have a massive effect on your physical health as well. So I know it's been held as a taboo subject for a long time, but take your mental health seriously. And now what you're seeing here is I'm using those stamped images that went slightly wrong, and I'm now using them as a backing piece instead to make my images a bit more stable. Nobody's going to know that, hey, it's stamped behind. So I'm going ahead and using my wax tool to help me place this onto the bunny. And I've just done this on the sentiment as I was telling you my story. And this is where disaster struck, and this is just to show it happens to all of us. But I went to just align my wax tool a little bit and snap, there it goes. My wax tool just broke. Thankfully I have another one, so I just grabbed it and finished off placing this bunny on the paper. And I just use the wax tool to help me slightly move the cardboard to make sure it's fully in place. And then use the other side just to press it down to make sure it's nice and secure. Putting that to the side to let it dry now. And now I'm grabbing my card base that I placed the cross stitch paper on earlier. And I've grabbed those 2 ovals from earlier along with the Tombow tape runner, that is the permanent tape runner. And I'm just going to quickly using my needle tool really quickly just to make sure all of the little circles on the outside of these ovals have been removed. There was a couple left in after I die cut them. I'm now taking my tape runner and I'm adding adhesive to the pink oval so I can attach this firmly to my white oval. Now I will use my tape runner to add this cardboard to cardboard. There is certain times, and you'll see that in a little while, where I will actually use Barely Art glue dots instead to adhere. In this case, I just decided that I was going to use the tape runner. And I then picked up my reverse tweezers. One of the best hacks I ever came across. Use your tweezers to help you place your die cuts. It helps take your hand out of the way so you can really see where you're placing it and get a better placement. And now I'm grabbing my Barely Art glue. And you're going to see I don't put solid lines in as I'm applying my glue. I'm actually using dots. And there's a couple of reasons for this. First of all, I find when I do the glue lines, it tends to seep out and then create that clear glue on the outside edges, which I don't want to see. But also, it allows me to pick it up with my tweezers and not get glue on my tweezers. And so I just find that really helps me out. I'm using my T ruler here more just to make sure that I'm aligning the bottom of my oval correctly and just giving myself a guide as to where 3 lines of the cross stitch was. And as I adjust this, I can go ahead and using my tweezers again just to look at the placement so I can eye it as well. And then holding my hand down, and I'm going to let this dry for a moment. And then whilst that's drying, I'm grabbing some foam squares. These particular squares came from my Spellbinders card kits. I tend not to use these with the card kits, mostly because the die cuts that come with it, I tend to use more in scrapbooking than on my cards. And I tend not to use foam dots in my die cuts for scrapbooking. So I'm just reusing them here. And I actually do use the outside because the whole thing is foam and adhesive. So I will get my craft knife to them once I've taken out the original ones, and I will use the whole pad. So that's just a little tip for you if you ever get these foam dot pads that are like that. You can use a craft knife to cut the rest to shape so you're not wasting any of that adhesive foam. And again, I'm using my tweezers now to place this onto my card. And then once I'm happy with the placement, you're going to see me place it down and then place my hand on top just to make sure that adhesive bonds with the cardstock behind it. And then I'm grabbing some double-sided tape. This also came from the card kit from Spellbinders. And I'm just adding that to the back of the sentiment that I cut and stamped earlier. And again, using my needle tool just to pull the backing tape off the back of the die cut. And again here, it doesn't like to cooperate with me and I have to go back and re-stick it again because it brought up the whole tape rather than just the backing. But easily fixed. Okay. And now I've got the backing off, I'm going to grab my tweezers again to hold this so I can place this easily without my fingers being in the way so I can get that perfect placement. And once I'm happy with it, I place it down and again place my finger on there just to make sure that adhesive contacts the paper behind it. And then finally, I'm using some of these adhesive gems from Spellbinders. These were the ones that came as a free gift with the club kits in December. If you subscribe to the Spellbinders clubs, you do get a free gift once a year, and this was one of the gifts that came this year. And I'm just using these to quickly embellish my card. So I put a couple up in the top right hand corner, a couple into the bottom right hand corner, and then I actually decided that the eyes in the sentiment would be cool if they were like little gems, so I also added them there, and you see me doing that right now. So again, thanks for joining me as I make this card. If you decide to make this card, don't forget to tag me at Elisa's Crafty Creations on Instagram so I can see your crafty creations. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. It lets me know you care and also helps me with the YouTube algorithm.